Hadrian Marlowe stands on the bridge of the mighty Demiurge, hovering above the conquered planet of Orgassos. The vast, unorthodox labyrinth of the ship has fallen under his command, as well as Orphan, the deformed spawn of Brethren. It speaks to Hadrian with two heads, and the half-mortal learns his daughter Cassandra has been taken to Medica. Edward Albay and the Urchtania Nas stand by his side as Hadrian prepares to issue a general broadcast to wider space. He proclaims Vorgassos has been defeated, Karn Sagara and Kalin Herendodes dead. Hadrian demands the captains of Vorgassos surrender or be destroyed, knowing the declaration of Herendodes' death will cause chaos within the Lateran monarchy. He reveals Karn Sagara's deception and displays Herendodes' body, another self of Karn Sagara in actuality. The transmission ends, and Hadrian commands Orphan to prepare the Archontic weapons on the Demiurge. These are the World Enders, weapons of unfathomable destructive potential stored by the dozens in the vast ship's hold. Hadrian is wary of another Karn Sagara rising from the ashes of Orgassos, and realizes he cannot let a single ship escape the planet lest that evil be allowed to resurface. Then, a transmission comes in. It is Lord Ohannes Duro of the Chantry vessel Bradamante, part of the Imperial fleet that had come with Hadrian to help take down Sagara. Duro demands to know why Hadrian has taken the Demiurge for himself, and even goes so far as to ask if Hadrian is a replica of Karn Sagara. The Chantry, which has despised Hadrian for centuries, trusts him even less now given his long imprisonment in the court of Kalin Herendodes. Hadrian is well aware the Chantry will seek to take the Demiurge from him, but then another Chantry ship, the Argentine, hails his bridge. Chantry Sentinel Knight Commander Kedron joins the call, and listens as Hadrian asks for permission to call in Commandant General Lorian Aristides. It will be necessary to secure the cooperation of the Laterans as the battle over Vorgassos continues to rage outside. Another call comes in, this time Vorgasine Fleet Captain Acastus Kozar. Kozar offers the full surrender of his forces to Hadrian and the Chantry, and Hadrian offers him and his captain safe harbor on the Demiurge. The move by Hadrian outrages the Chantry commanders, whose authority has once again been subverted. All the while, Lorian Aristides does not answer any of Hadrian's calls. Hadrian and his officers, including the Cielsan Ramanthanu, begin to await the arrival of the captains of Orgassos. Soon enough, a spherical shuttle arrives, and Fleet Captain Kozar disembarks at the head of a contingent of extra Solarians. Among them is Here Soon Changed, a strange creature floating in a jar transported on 4 legs, and Captain D-307 Aleph and Captain Nebet Hut. The commanders warn Hadrian that his victory, no matter how great, will have incredible consequences on the future of the galaxy. You are like a man who, finding a fence in the wilderness, tears it down to clear the land, and doing so releases a lion from its pen. Did you think your emperor the only stabilizing force in our galaxy? Sagara was a wall against the sea. Now the water will rise. The 4 captains are ordered to surrender their weapons and become prisoners of Hadrian, who realizes it may have been a mistake allowing them back on the extra Solarian ship. Then, the Demiurge suddenly begins taking fire from the Vorgasine fleet. Captain Kozar asserts he knows nothing of the betrayal, while Nebet Hut only smiles. Suddenly, she begins to laugh, and is revealed to be another body of Karn Sagara. She turns and kills Kozar, who had served the Undying for 5,000 years. Sagara turns on Hadrian and blasts him with a gigawatt maser, but Hadrian has mastered the powers given to him by the Quiet, and to the casual eye seems to phase through the space between him and his mortal foe. The beam struck the rear of the hold, then Hadrian Marlowe reappeared, not where he had been, not in the path of the beam, but 3 cubits to the left and as many nearer his assailant. I moved across time like a wave, crashing on that crowded hold. Every motion, every decision made by every combatant in that place made ripples, eddies, currents in the waters of time, currents I alone could swim against. Hadrian, with otherworldly ease, cuts through Karn's guards, joined by his soldiers and the ever-present Ramanthanu. The battle is brief, and soon he stands before Nebet Hut. Again, Hadrian commands her to surrender, but Sagara suddenly convulses and collapses, dead. The comms to Lateran and Imperial forces go silent, with thousands of ships engaged in combat above Vorgassos still. Hadrian knows the planet must be destroyed, but there are 3 million civilians in the city below. Back at the helm, Orphan counsels Edward that the Archontic weapons may need to be deployed. Hadrian contacts Edward to inform him of Sagara's gambit, but the extra Solarian shuttle then explodes. Edward loses contact with Hadrian, but then receives a call from Duro offering aid. Multiple objects in the thousands suddenly rise from the surface of Vorgassos. Analysis confirms they are missiles, in such overwhelming numbers they cannot be stopped. However, holographs on the bridge show Edward the missiles carry small spheres that appear to be communication lasers. The missiles are not designed to attack the ships, but for Sagara to escape. Orphan claims there is a weapon capable of destroying the swarm, and Hadrian then returns to the bridge and authorizes it to be used. It is one of the least powerful in the arsenal, a sphere of high matter with a density and hardness to rival a star's core. The weapon called Albedo is launched, and by inhuman mechanisms is able to fly through the transmitters of Sagara, changing direction with blinding speed. All the transmitters are soon reported to be destroyed, but it is unknown if Sagara was able to transmit out of the system. Captain Gosal, one of Hadrian's men, witnessed the ships explode on contact with Albedo, effectively vaporized. The light that washed over us used to be ships, people, every atom blasted down to pure light, matter turned to energy. And you know what the worst thing about it was? It was beautiful. It really was. Clean. The way you think war should be. Over and done. Stationed on the Gadelica, Gosal orders his ship to return to the Demiurge. Strategos Duro then patches in with new commands. He asserts Hadrian is actually an extra Solarian replica and has been killed by the Chantry forces. He counsels Gosal to plead for mercy before the Emperor, but the brave captain ends the comm and continues to the Demiurge. He and his crew then witness the massive ship opening fire on a distant target. The problem now lies with how to deal with Duro and the Chantry forces. Peace with the extra Solarians is no longer an option, and Lorien remains dark on the comms. Hadrian realizes it is out of hurt, for he did not trust his friend with Herondoti's secret, compounded by the fact he had taken the Demiurge for himself. The Vorgasine fleet has been destroyed, and a shaken Doros condemns Hadrian for using a weaponized daemon in combat. The Strategos regains his composure, and reveals the Chantry forces look to destroy the Lateran fleet entirely. It is part of a larger plan to regain imperial control over the arm of Norma and Vale, but Hadrian refuses to betray their allies and Lorien. Furious, he ends the transmission. However, the Demiurge then inexplicably fires on the Lateran sojourner Hermetic Melancholia. Orphan reports its controls have been somehow subverted, and then Kedron suddenly resonates in Hadrian's combat suit. "It is war, my lord," said the voice, "whether you will or no." The Chantry Sentinels have infiltrated the Demiurge and hacked into its systems, coercing it to fire upon the Laterans. It is a stunning move, one indicating the Chantry have vast technological resources unknown to the rest of the Imperium. Hadrian sends his forces out to find the Sentinels and take them down. Ramanthanu heads out with the remaining loyal Cielsen and several Urchtani, including a Naz. A Cielsen named Bakashi is killed by the heavily armored Sentinels, but more of the Chantry warriors still lurk in the ship. Their weapons are revolutionary, including self-targeting grenades undoubtedly aided by machinery. The Urchtani take the lead, spreading out to search for the rest of the Sentinels. Outside, the Lateran fleet falls into disarray, with many ships fleeing. Hadrian decides the Demiurge will remain above Vorgassos, not wanting to abandon Lorien. Anaz leads the Urchtani in a dangerous hunt, and is guided by Hadrian over comms to the ship's computer core. There they encounter 3 Sentinels, who inflict heavy casualties on the Birdmen. Their homing missiles tear through the Urchtani, and their black armored suits are revealed to have flying capabilities. The Sentinels also wield massive, wide lasers of high matter that effortlessly cut through the Urchtani. Only 3 of the Chantry warriors are needed to kill 100 of the Birdmen, and it is only through sheer numbers they are able to tear one of the Sentinels apart. Then Hadrian himself appears, and confronts the 2 surviving Sentinels. He raised his sword, and caught Earthman's beam on edge of sword. Hadrian marvels at the advanced weaponry of the Chantry, which could have been a massive boon to the war against the Cielsen. The beams of deadly high matter both stretch nearly 200 feet, and it is only through his powers he is able to close the distance to the Sentinels. Hadrian cuts the bridge out from under all of them, and they fall hundreds of feet to the floor below. The Sentinels are killed upon landing, But the job is not done, and they charge on to the core of the Demiurge. There, Hadrian and the surviving Urchtani reunite with Ramanthanu, but they all encounter 6 more sentinels. They charge, taking more casualties, and more sentinels emerge from the walls around them. Hadrian notices they are guarding a black box, a computer wired directly into the mainframe of the Demiurge. It is called the Eidolon, and Hadrian throws his sword at it and manages to sever its cables. After vicious fighting, 12 sentinels lay dead, but Kedron's whereabouts are still unknown. Hadrian approaches Eidolon, and a feminine voice called Ship emanates from it. It is an artificial intelligence and appears as the form of a beautiful young woman. It reveals that somehow it was made on Earth, a place of ancient myth Hadrian had believed to be a desolate wasteland. Shocked, but unwilling to risk letting the daemon live, he destroys the Eidolon. Kedron's voice then booms around Hadrian and his men, stating the Chantry must have the Demiurge to take on the Watchers. "They aren't gods," I said. "You're right, thing," Kedron said. "There are no gods." It stuns Hadrian that even the Chantry do not believe in their deities, but what Kedron says next chills his bones. The Knight Commander threatens the life of Cassandra, and Hadrian races away to Medica in a cold fury. He finds Cassandra safe and unharmed, recovering from losing her arm on Vorgassos. It seems Kedron has tricked him, and Hadrian turns to rejoin the defense of the ship. Cassandra tries to rise and help him, but Hadrian orders her to stay behind. Orphan patches in, stating Kedron was able to infiltrate the Demiurge with the aid of a cutting of the Tree of Columbia. The Sentinel Commander, however, is now hidden in the depths of the ship, presumably to sabotage Hadrian in whatever way he can. Massive explosions begin to go off, and Hadrian races away. A weakened Cassandra then escapes her guards to chase after Hadrian. Feverish thoughts race through her mind, as she still only has one arm and is bleeding from her wounds. For almost miles she runs after Hadrian, and then encounters a massive metallic hand. However, it races past her, seeming to bear her no mind. More hands appear, and Cassandra follows them until she hears plasma fire in the distance. She finds her way to the ship's shield generator, and there sees the hands crawling towards Kedron. The Sentinel is fighting them off, and Cassandra strikes. She knows Hadrian wants him alive, but Kedron sees her coming and avoids her attack. He tries to talk her down, claiming Hadrian is an extrasolarian homunculus. Kedron draws a high matter sword and duels Cassandra, who then realizes the hands are swarming towards the shield console. Kedron seems to have not rigged it with a bomb, but something else entirely. Their fight rages on, until at last Cassandra lands a crippling blow to his sword arm. However, Kedron unleashes several homing missiles, causing Cassandra to fall back. Both tumble down, and a massive electric shock strikes them both. Kedron is killed, but Cassandra somehow survives and is carried away by the Urchtani. It is revealed the metal hands are called Uthras, self-replicating machines that service the immune system for the Demiurge. News of Kedron and Cassandra's battle reaches Hadrian, who storms back to the bridge. He contacts Duros, who undoubtedly knew of Kedron's mission. The Strategos is coldly unapologetic, regarding Hadrian as subhuman. He does not deny the Chantry's use of daemons, and demands that Hadrian surrender. Hadrian refuses, and explosions again rock the Demiurge as the Bradamante and Imperial fleet open fire. Orphan deploys Albedo, and Hadrian sends a desperate transmission to Lorien, warning him of the Chantry's schemes and true capabilities. The Demiurge simply does not have the time left to become warp-ready, and lighter craft from the Chantry fleet surround it, ready to scavenge from its wreckage. At last, however, Lorien Aristides responds. Though embittered against Hadrian for his deceit, the Lateran ship Mistwalker opens fire on the Imperial fleet. Hadrian turns to Orphan, who deploys another Archontic weapon against the Chantry. It chooses Artemisian, a mile-long tube with 12 projectiles. Duros scoffs at Hadrian's last offer to surrender, and the weapon is fired. It fires a single projectile, which creates a line singularity by having its mechanisms fold through the higher dimensions of space. It becomes infinitely dense and unstoppable, plowing through the Bradamante like a black hole. Duros is killed, and Hadrian once more finds himself an enemy of the Empire. Lorien patches in again, and is told of the battle with Sagara and the Sentinels. He declines to accompany Hadrian, opting to let Hadrian chase what Lorien calls his dream to kill the Watchers. Both commanders say their goodbyes and take their ships to flee Vorgassos. Hadrian decides to not destroy the planet, unable to bring himself to slaughter the millions still on the surface. After the battle for Vorgassos, Hadrian flees with the Demiurge to the only refuge he has left, Annika. There, for several decades, he remains in exile, and during that time unsuccessfully tries to teach Cassandra how to fear the quiet. Hadrian also sends a transmission to Prince Chaim of Jad, one of the few close friends remaining to him. Chaim answers the call after many years, and they meet some light years away from Annika. There, Chaim is brought on board the Demiurge and is shown several of its weapons. He is also told of the battle over Vorgassos, how the planet is now under Chantry control and the ship Argentine managed to escape the fighting. The prince learns of the nature of the Watchers, and several important revelations Hadrian has learned from Orphan. Apparently, the Mercani weapons of old had developed a level of sophistication that allowed them to see the higher dimensions of the universe. They became literal machine gods created by humanity, and it was only with the intervention of the Quiet and the first God Emperor they could be defeated. Orphan reveals the emergence of the first William threw the machines into disarray, clouding their visions of the future. And so they looked beyond time and saw the truth entire, that our cosmos is a dream, a simulation. From above, our space-time appears very small. Beyond it, there is the all. And in that all, the Mercani gazed and made first contact with the Watchers. Orphan alleges the Watchers are eerily akin to machines themselves, pure wills of energy that have been with the race of humanity since its birth. There was also a schism long ago amongst the Mercani, in which some of the machines rebelled against the Watchers. There was a war, one that lasted less than an instant, one that claimed millions of lives. That war greatly weakened the machines, allowing for the God Emperor to hunt them down in his war. The surviving faction of the machines continued their research into higher dimensions, having no place in the Solan Empire while also rejecting the Watchers. Hadrian reveals those machines had found the Quiet, who in turn used them to build the current weapons found on the Demiurge. The machines built the powerful weapons for humanity, and Hadrian tells Chaim brethren had been part of the faction of machines that had sided with humanity to build the Demiurge. The ship itself is even designed in such a way that its unorthodox geometry acts as camouflage against the eyes of the Watchers. Hadrian then changes tack, and asks Prince Chaim for aid. He must travel to Forum in order to contact the Emperor, to update him on the half-mortal strategy for the war against the Cielcin and Watchers. Hadrian refuses to bring the Demiurge close to Forum, and must use Chaim effectively as a protector. By this point, Hadrian's allegiance to the Empire itself has waned considerably, and he decrees he serves mankind first and foremost. Imperial forces and military might are a necessary evil to him to defeat the two great enemies of humanity. Hadrian shows Chaim and his officials the single finger he took from Siriani Doriaca. He tells them how the Cielcin prince is slowly transforming into a Watcher. Through this, the prince has gained powers that effectively mirror Hadrian's. But from their depths, they could see our universe entire, as a diver sees the sun shining through the surface from 1,000 feet below. That was how Siriani had found me, and snatched at me across the light years. Hadrian proposes to Chaim that they must take the initiative in the war, to gather the Cielcin in one final decisive engagement to destroy them and the Watchers. The half-mortal himself will act as bait to draw the Watchers out, and he plans to use a special weapon capable of collapsing the core of a star to kill them all. Chaim is at last introduced to Orphan, the last of the line of Columbia and the Americans, and Hadrian prepares to sail the Forum, not for the sake of the Emperor, but for the future of humanity. On the journey, Hadrian visits Here Soon Changed. It, much like Karn Sagara, is searching for a perfect form of existence, one beyond even immortality. Its final form may be a daemon, one resembling a god itself. To Hadrian's surprise, he learns Here Soon Change used to be a part of the Chantry and was even born on Earth. Later, their convoy stops at Annika, where Chaim is shown the Black City of the Quiet, slowly being built until perhaps the end of time. Hadrian entrusts its location and secret to the Jadians and Cassandra, stating this site is the most important source of learning in the galaxy. This place is proof that the universe was made, O Lauren, not by your Ahura Mazda, the Absolute. For 9 years, the Demiurge travels with the Jadians, until at last Hadrian leaves the mighty ship to shuttle down to Forum with Caim. For the first time in centuries, Hadrian steps foot in the heart of the Solan Empire. He and Caim are greeted by an imperial party, led by the aging Crown Prince Aurelian. Aurelian demands to see Hadrian, decreeing he is a traitor and war criminal. Hadrian obliges, stepping forward in the shining royal white armor he wore when he was a knight Victorian. His youthful appearance stuns the crowd and Aurelian, and Hadrian claims he has 3 gifts to offer the empire. Synarch Heraclonas of the Chantry then steps forward, demanding justice for the death of Ohannes Duro. In the crowd, Hadrian also spies Cantor Samek, the Chantry agent who had killed him with dysphalide poison. Loudly, he confirms he killed Duro, declaring the Strategos to be a traitor. His first gift is brought forth, the remnants of the Chantry daemon taken from Vorgassos. The Synarch is incredulous, but the Cantors in the back are silent, for the real power behind the Chantry lies with them, in the Synod and its choir. Aurelian seems to be assured Hadrian is in fact real, not a homunculus conjured by the Extrasolarians. Hadrian asserts he does not want the throne, and reaffirms the Chantry's alignments with daemons to the onlooking crowd. He takes his military commendations off his armor, including the grass crown, and casts them on the ground. Then, Hadrian proclaims that if he is not allowed to leave Forum, he will destroy the city. His second gift to the Empire is one of the Mericani weapons, a dark energy cannon capable of firing faster than light. In secret, he has also given Caim one of the weapons, in hopes it will help the Jadians in their savage war against the Lothrians. Hadrian's final gift is the Lateran map, one that exposes the Cielcin telegraph network. It can provide the Empire the real-time location of the Cielcin fleet, but Hadrian states he will only offer it to the Emperor himself. Though politically Hadrian has short-term momentum, the narrative surrounding him is already firmly entrenched. His enemies in the Chantry and rival political families proclaim him an abomination, a criminal for killing Strategos Duro. Aurelian closes his eyes for a brief moment, and then agrees to let Hadrian meet with the Emperor. However, Hadrian's threat to destroy the Eternal City has left a sour taste in the mouths of many there, and has certainly not assuaged the enmity between him and the Chantry. After 3 days, Hadrian is at last summoned for a meeting with Emperor William the 23rd. He enters a dark room, foregoing any sense of decorum when addressing the Emperor. A holograph of the Emperor's face appears to him, and Hadrian tells him how he was remade by the Absolute. The 2 men, allies of old and perhaps even friends, discuss the escape of the Watcher Ushara from Sabratha. Something seems slightly off about William's holograph, but Hadrian watches as the Emperor takes the developments in stride. We've done it. We've reached the end of history. We walk in myth again, as in the beginning. Surprising Hadrian, William apologizes for how he handled Valka's death, genuinely regretting his tasteless words that led Hadrian to strike him. He tells him Selena is with him, and Hadrian then tells the Emperor his plan of a preemptive strike against Dorayega and the Cielcin. The Emperor learns of the Archontic weapon Voidmaker, which can project an energy field capable of destroying everything inside. It can thus be used to kill the Watchers, provided the Cielcin fleet is prevented from jumping to warp. The Emperor is then quiet for a time. Nigh 2,000 years have passed on Earth since I was born. 2,000 years, and still it's not enough. This war should have been over 1,000 years ago. I should have seen it end. Emperor William the 23rd of House Avent is dying, and Hadrian offers not to serve him, but to stand with him as his right-hand man. William tells Hadrian he is at Gododin, where the full might of the imperial legions will be summoned. Then I shall come to you, I said, raising my face to that shining colossus. Call your ships, all your legions. We shall take the war to them, and make an ending of it, you and I. Thus Hadrian prepares to depart Forum for Gododin. As his shuttle flies away, he sees Cantor Samek, his murderer from centuries ago, watching him leave. he returns to the Demiurge and travels for 4 years to Gododin, the Imperial base of operations chosen for its strategic location in the Inner Centaurus. Along the way, the Demiurge is at last revealed to the wider Imperial military in all its terrible glory at the planet of Tenba. He and his crew arrive at Gododin to find it swarming with ships, a number Hadrian has not seen since his time at Yue. They are scattered at high orbit, as well as around the outer planets of the system, which include the desolate Scinon. It is a collection of vessels from many societies, for the Tavrosi, Normans, Nipponese, Mendari, and Durantines have all come for war. Jad, bogged down in its other borders fighting the Lothrians, and the Laterans have not come in strength, however. Among the greatest of ships there is the Imperial flagship Aurora, where Hadrian presumes Emperor William resides. Hadrian is directed down to the city of Catraith, where Fort Din is located. Imperial legions and Martians greet them as he lands, with one lord striding forwards. Tall was he as any lord of men should be, and hard, cold, and remote as distant suns. The long years since our parting had remade him root and branch, so that little, and perhaps none, of the boy I'd known remained. Prince Alexander greets Hadrian coldly, foregoing all sense of friendship and hospitality. He cuts a powerful, imposing figure and claims to speak with the Emperor's voice. Among Alexander's party is Sir Grey Reinhardt, but also Leonid Bartos. Bartos immediately reprimands Hadrian for killing Ohannes Duro, but the topic of conversation turns to the Cielsen. The Pale have not launched an attack in decades, and Hadrian asserts they are gathering strength for a massive assault. He argues a preemptive strike from humanity must be launched before this happens. Alexander is skeptical, throwing barbs at Hadrian's crew and even calling Cassandra a bastard. Then, Basander Lin approaches, and even drops to a knee to greet Hadrian. His reverence of the half-mortal has persisted even through the long years, and he asks to see a map of the Cielsen locations. The Imperial delegation claims the map is fraudulent, but then to their horror, Orphan steps forwards and asserts its validity. The biases of the strategist compel them to turn it away, but Alexander comes to believe it can help the Imperial cause. He turns to depart, and leans in to say a final few words to Hadrian. "I never wanted you dead," he said. "You only needed to learn your place." I looked at him, and looking saw for the first time that day the shadow of the petulant boy I had taken for squire, a shrinking serpent coiled tight within the hollow husk of a much larger man. A brat, I'd called him. That much had not changed. Preparations begin for the decisive actions against the Cielsen. The Tavrosi Grand Admiral Satha Kul supports Hadrian's strategy of taking the fight to the Cielsen. However, unfortunately for Hadrian, his long time away from the Empire means politics and rumors meant to discredit him may have finally, unavoidably, caught up to him. Duro's belief, and Kedron's, that I was an invention of Vorgassos had taken root in the Imperium. Debates swing back and forth, for many fear that if Imperial forces are to mass at one location, the Cielsen will simply strike elsewhere at humanity's less defended refuges. Because it seems, however, that at some point a massive battle will occur at Gododin, a humongous evacuation effort commences on the planet. It is a daunting task, for the Empire must find a way to get 2 billion non-combatants off the planet before the Cielsen arrive. Hadrian shares a moment with Cassandra, who is effectively his heir. He counsels her that when his task is finally done, she must find the Jadians. They are the only people he trusts, for Hadrian knows a final death of his is a real possibility, and that the Emperor himself is likely dying as well. Time passes, stretching into weeks. The Cielsen still do not emerge from the darkness, and to Hadrian's surprise, there is not a single assassination attempt from the Chantry against him. Then, the Cielsen fleet stops signaling on the Vorgasine map. They are on the move, but to Hadrian's frustration, their destination is utterly unknown. He curses Duro and Kedron, whose actions cost him decades in space hiding as an exile. Hadrian and Basander Lin enter the war room, filled with his familiars and enemies alike. The council discusses how it has been 97 years since the last Cielsen attack, and that the map also does not account for any new world ships that may have been built during that time. It would now be folly for the Empire to strike in the dark, almost certain suicide. Hadrian, however, still has the secret Archontic weapons in his back pocket. He proposes they instead draw all the Cielsen into one location, and then asks Alexander if Emperor William is awake. Hadrian suggests he talk with the Emperor alone to authorize a strike on Nessus to bait the Cielsen out. Grey Reinhardt worries the Cielsen may simply pass Gododin and strike for him, while Basander Lin boldly suggests Earth itself may be a target. Hadrian comes to believe the ancient home of humanity may indeed be Dorayeka's goal. He declares he will take the Demiurge out to strike directly at Dorayeka, and asks for supporters whose ships can be held in the hold. Grand Admiral Satha Kul and Basander Lin volunteer, and Alexander eventually agrees to authorize the expedition. It is a great gambit by Hadrian, banking entirely on the hypothesis that Dorayeka will be compelled to attack him personally. Preparations begin to leave Gododin, with the situation on the ground slowly worsening. The Minos plague has reached the general populace, with Hadrian and even Prince Alexander's contingent opting to remain on the ground. Some 5 days before departure, an androgen of the imperial house summons Hadrian. He is led through the desperate crowds waiting for ships to take them off-world, and there at last finds her. It is the Princess Selena, some 65 years since they parted ways on Laterra. She remains young, having only spent 6 months out of Fugue since then. Selena is confident Hadrian is no traitor to the Empire, and is as shocked as everyone else that the Chantry works with daemons. Hadrian does not forget the beautiful princess once confessed her love for him as she walks closer towards him. They embrace and kiss, but Hadrian cannot help but think of Valka during the moment. Hadrian warns Selena he will not return from his mission, believing he will die once his purpose for the Absolute has been fulfilled. His sole motivation in life now is to fight for that cause, to destroy the Watchers and preserve a future for humanity. He has correctly guessed the Emperor is dying, and that Alexander is being groomed for the throne by the Chantry itself. Selena begs to go with Hadrian when he leaves, but he spurns her, telling her she only loves a dream. The time comes at last to leave Gododin. Prince Alexander visits Hadrian before he leaves. Hadrian regrets how their paths have led them to being mortal enemies, though he congratulates Alexander on becoming inheritor to the throne. The prince is to become a mouthpiece and puppet for the Chantry after William's death, meant to help conceal the great deception the institution puts forth about the daemons and Watchers. Hadrian says this to Alexander's face, but the prince lashes out and again attacks Hadrian for associating with Red Company, Valka, and his daughter, all subhuman in his eyes. With that, I mounted the ramp and climbed up into the hold. How small he seemed, how shrunken, how forlorn, a figure in white, wearing the incongruous statement of a helm, hands on his hips. Too slim those shoulders to bear the weight of the Empire, too brittle those bones. As Hadrian sails away from Fort Din, he soberly contemplates the future of the Empire. Alexander is undoubtedly of lesser character and strength than William, and it seems destined the mighty Sullan Empire, already fraying at its edges, will fall into a further state of decay and rot. Then, he discovers Princess Selena has stowed away in his shuttle, along with her executor knight Varus, the towering slave knight whose face is hidden by a mask of shining chrome. She reveals William is dying from the Fleshing Plague, contracted on Delgavica when he visited refugees there. He has been in Fugue the entire time, only being awakened to speak with Hadrian. Hadrian is silent for a moment, and then tells Selena after the mission he will fly with her to find the Hakurani, another Xenobite race hunted by the Cielsen. The Demiurge sets sail on a search for Darantun, the world ship of Siriani Dorayeka. However, planet of Danu they find its signal gone. It is a significant setback, though 24 Cielsen world ships still ring the planet. Hadrian's commanders wonder if the Watchers noticed their approach and had Dorayeka flee, but all agree the Cielsen over Danu must still be destroyed. Edward objects, for the Cielsen world ships will fall to Danu and destroy the planet if they are taken down. Satha Kul suggests using the Darklight Archontic weapon, which can be used in stealth to locally accelerate a region of space-time to devastating effect. The Demiurge only has a few hours before its location is discovered by the Cielsen, and Hadrian assesses Danu is as good as dead already. Edward calls the action murder, but Hadrian authorizes the firing of Darklight. They wait on the bridge with bated breath to see if the weapon was successful. Then, a signal comes in. It turns out to be a group of refugees on the surface, some 3,000 people begging for aid. Hadrian freezes, his heart compelling him to save the refugees. Battle will soon erupt with the Cielsen, and with the firing of Darklight, he now believes the Watcher's eyes will also be drawn to Danu. Hadrian decides to lead a rescue mission, taking shuttles down to the surface. He also now sees an opportunity to lay his trap, to unleash the Voidmaker while on Danu to destroy Dorayeka, the Watchers, and himself in a suicide mission. The shuttles tear down to the surface of the planet, which is being ripped apart by the gravitational pull of the world ships. Cassandra insists on accompanying him, however, along with Anaz and Dirchtani and Ramanthanu Cielsen. Hadrian's team manages to find the refugees, and to his shock, they all have red hair. They look eerily like Hadrian's friend of old, Switch. Their leader Argo greets Hadrian, and then a brilliantly bright explosion goes off overhead. It is the dark light destroying the Cielsen world ship, and the atomic blast blinds all those who inadvertently glance up at it. Hadrian's soldiers move to corral the refugees. Some resist their aid, and are consequently left to fend for themselves. It is a race against time, for Hadrian can now begin to feel the Watcher's eyes on him. He then sees a child's drawing depicting a hero fighting the Cielsen to protect men and women with red hair. Perhaps most notably, the hero's eyes are green. As Danu shakes beneath them, the shuttles are loaded with refugees. However, a chill comes over Hadrian as their time runs out. Across it all fell the shadow, a shadow no other eye could see. That shadow fell not upon the world of dust and atoms, but across the vast breadth of time. It had seen me. The Watchers have come, and with his vision, Hadrian sees Danu seem to shrink beneath his feet. He brings Edward's transmitter to fire the Voidmaker to his hand as he peers across the icy landscape. A high, cold voice reaches out to him. Think you that you could hide forever? I told you once, long ago. I told you that time runs down. Did I not? You did, I said in answer, and turned to face my enemy. To face Siriani Dorayeka. Hadrian stands off with the Prince of the Pale, who remarks how Utanash, the Absolute, has remade the half-mortal. The two wills of opposing cosmic powers square off as Hadrian's comm crackles with reports of the refugee shuttles flying away. Another world ship is destroyed above, and Dorayeka glances up at the sky, seemingly unbothered. What you see is but the smallest fragment of my power. My generals have sired armies on your dams. You call them sorcerers, have forged new legions of chimeric soldiers. We will burn your eternal city, and the seats of your lords. I will feast upon the flesh of your emperor, and feed his entrails to my slaves. And when I am done, and all your empire is ashes, I will take your home, your earth for my seat. Dorayeka foretells the destruction of Forum as a strange peace comes over Hadrian. Powered by the righteousness of his cause for the Absolute, he defies Dorayeka and states humanity will never surrender. Then, the voice of Mutanar the Watcher issues out of Dorayeka's mouth, and Hadrian meets its eyes. I saw a universe of darkness, absent any star, worlds of night and cold, worlds of fire, warmed and driven by machines, a cosmos made chaos, cut off from the light of God. The universe was not unmade, it was cut adrift. The Watchers would not create a new reality at all. They would poison ours, so that when the Absolute returned, however late, however delayed, there would be nothing left to save. What would it matter that good must triumph if so little of it was left? The ringing of bells begins to echo in the wind as the Demiurge fires Darklight again. Hadrian then turns and sees the refugee shuttles all explode into flame, with his daughter Cassandra among them. Fury, grief, and love overcome Hadrian, and he leaps at Dorayeka with his high matter sword kindled. But Dorayeka catches the weapon, gloating how Utanash has abandoned Hadrian. It shakes Hadrian off, and then draws out an archaic black weapon with a white blade. It is a Cielsen form of a high matter sword, and the Pale Prince attacks. Both warriors battle across time, flickering in and out of different possibilities so quick they only appear as still images. Hadrian fights valiantly, but with his heart shattered by the death of Cassandra, his strength fails. He loses Edward's transmitter in the fight, and falls to Dorayeka's mercy. Hope leaves him as then suddenly Ushara appears. The Watcher approaches Hadrian and again tries to tempt him with a vision of the future, in which he sits as an immortal king of humanity, Ushara as his bride. Hadrian sees himself receive riches and tribute and wield a white skull, the remnants of Doriaca. It becomes clear to him that Ushara is offering to support him as her weapon of choice, as she is not explicitly allied with Mudanar. She would have humanity ascend over the Enar and Cielcin and form a new empire with Hadrian. Doriaca, seemingly unaware of Ushara's ploy, continues to demand Hadrian's surrender. Hadrian has no answer, instead rising and with his divine power swinging his blade at Ushara. No human hand, no human blade could touch that fleshless flesh. But mine did. My sword bit the unholy flesh that was no flesh at all, and at once she vanished, black figure gone. Ushara abandons Hadrian, who stands to fight out of his love for Cassandra. The combatants lock together, and Hadrian glimpses into Doriaca's eyes for a brief moment. In them, he sees the malice of Mudanar the Dreamer, and he headbutts the Pale Prince. Doriaca's crystalline flesh, transformed by its metamorphosis into the Watcher, shatters and it vanishes across time. Again they duel, but Doriaca raises its hand for a killing blow. Then, inexplicably, another sword flashes out and cuts off the sword hand of Doriaca. It is Cassandra, baffling Hadrian. He wonders if it is an illusion, and orders her to recall the refugee shuttles. Doriaca rushes forwards to attack both of them, this time drawing Hadrian's former blade, the one gifted to him by Aloran Milta centuries ago. Cassandra leaps in front of Hadrian to defend him, but without the powers of the Quiet, Hadrian knows she will be no match for Doriaca. Hadrian sees her death happen countless ways, and then orders the Ichtani to fly her back to the shuttles. He races to Doriaca again, and this time they move their battle to a dimension Hadrian has never seen before. He becomes hyper-aware of the Song of the Watchers, the smallness of the universe as they fight in the space beyond space. Then somehow, they flicker into Darantun itself. Mudanar briefly tries to corrupt Hadrian, sending him a vision that implies the Absolute only sees him as a worm to be disregarded. But Hadrian shakes it off, and suddenly believes the Watcher is afraid of him and the Absolute. But Doriaca laughs, for it is not fear Hadrian senses, but hatred. Mudanar unleashes the full scope of its strength, speed, and will in a renewed attack, and slams its sword into Hadrian's gut. He stumbles and falls out of Darantun and lands back on Danu. He turns and barely makes it back to the last shuttle, where the Ichtani and a very much alive Cassandra are waiting. The shuttles race to the atmosphere, with Mudanar and Doriaca having been driven away by Hadrian. The thought of why Mudanar had spared the refugees suddenly races through his mind, no clear answer coming to Hadrian. Then, he senses a static charge in the air, and one of the transports is destroyed. Ushara has remained near Danu, and is now attacking Hadrian and his troops. The remaining shuttles frantically jump to warp and manage to make it back to the Demiurge. Only 3 end up making it back safely, and Basander and the Tavrosi fleet are locked in a desperate fight against the Cielcin. And most importantly, Hadrian has failed to kill Doriaca, Mudanar, or Ushara. Knowing the situation to be lost, Hadrian orders for Lin and Cole to be brought back in. He then briefly captures a glimpse of a figure of night, seen only by him. Ushara has managed to follow them to the Demiurge, and Hadrian orders Orphan to prepare for war. Danu, for all intents and purposes, is as good as destroyed. He and Cassandra then hear a shot in the hold outside. They race into the hall to find one of the refugees attacking a legionnaire in a maddened state. More crazed refugees emerge out of the group and attack Hadrian's troops. He begins to wonder if they're SOMs, but notes not all of the survivors are behaving the same way as the attackers. The maddened refugees wreak havoc across Hadrian's legionnaires, who have no discernible cause for the sudden attacks. Hadrian then stares at one of the dead Danuans, and notes his glassy eyes and eerily wide smile. He turns and again sees a dark woman at the end of the hall, who smiles at him and suddenly vanishes. Hadrian races to the bridge, running past dead Danuans and legionnaires as the halls descend into chaos. He calms Edward, warning him Ushara has somehow possessed many of the men from Danu and incited them to attack Hadrian's soldiers. Then, a legionnaire also becomes possessed by Ushara and turns on a refugee. Stunners have no effect on the attackers, but Hadrian gives orders to subdue as many of them as possible and for them to be put into fugue. A young survivor named William approaches Hadrian with 3 other children, and Hadrian offers to escort them to the bridge, accompanied by Cassandra, Ramanthanu, and a soldier named Holden. They battle another group of the possessed as the demiurge jumps to warp. A crazed Donovan suddenly comes back to his senses and dies from his wounds. It seems the warp jump disrupted Ushara's influence. However, the effect only turns out to be temporary, and a refugee rises with a sword embedded in his stomach. He briefly speaks with the voice of Ushara before being shot down. Hadrian continues to the bridge to save the demiurge, while the battle with the Cielsen continues to rage outside. Bassander Lin and Satha Kul's Tavrosi put up a valiant fight, supported by the terrible weapons of the Maracani. Hadrian's company encounters Captain Gosal, who also turns out to be possessed by Ushara. She continues to try and turn Hadrian, whose party of 9 suddenly becomes surrounded by 50 crazed soldiers. A bloody retreat ensues, with Gosal being killed and Hadrian ordering the survivors to fall back to the tramway. Amidst the chaos, one of Ramanthanu's Cielsen betrays Hadrian, becoming reconverted to worshipping the Watchers due to Ushara's display of power. Holden kills it quickly, and volunteers to stay back and cover Hadrian's retreat. The brave soldier sacrifices himself, and is torn to pieces by Ushara's possessed. Outside, the dark light continues to rip through the Cielsen, the full might of the Archontic weapons finally unleashed in battle against the Pale. Bassander Lin and Satha Kul try to frantically escape the killing zone or risk being caught in the explosions. On the Demiurge, the Uthras finally race to Hadrian's side, and behind a charge led by Cassandra are able to pin down the crazed soldiers. The child William is shot in the final scuffle and dies, and then a new voice speaks to Hadrian. Cassandra was facing me. There was blood on her face, in her hair, and the light in her emerald eyes was like nothing human. And she was smiling. Still you ask yourself that idiot question. Still you think yourself a good man. We'd not gone far enough. Hadrian, tense with fear, demands Ushara leave his daughter. Cassandra also tries to fight the Watcher off, and Hadrian, left with no other option, embraces her. Ushara then compels Cassandra to ignite her sword, impaling both her and Hadrian. Both collapse, locking eyes on the floor as Hadrian thinks of Valka one last time. Hadrian then hears a faint chiming of bells, and slips in and out of consciousness. He vaguely sees Nima, Selena, Edward, and Orphan looking on at him in a Medica tank, and remembers all of the terrible events that passed on the Demiurge. Anarian. The old, familiar voice, bright-edged, razor-sharp. Valka appears to Hadrian in that moment, who is hovering between life and death. He tries to reach out, but cannot quite touch her. I got a smile, those darkly painted lips parting, curling. One last fight, she said, and raised her eyes to mine. They were Cassandra's eyes. And Hadrian returns to the world of the living, finding Bassander Lin sitting at his bedside. He learns Cassandra is barely alive, and Lin is shaken by the inhumanity he saw from the recordings of the possessed Danuans. The implications of Ushara wielding that power on a planet's populace are nothing short of terrifying. Bassander also reveals that his fleet was forced to fight Ushara herself in battle. They had no answer, with a quarter of Lin's ships destroyed and almost the entirety of the Tavrosi fleet, including Grand Admiral Kol, lost. It appeared in orbit, came out of nowhere. It was like a ship, Marlowe. More like a ship than a living thing. All these rings turning about a flaming heart. Like giant hands, it broke our ships in its hands. Hadrian's force suffered massive casualties, but managed to take down 9 Cielsen world ships in battle. Presently, he visits an unconscious Cassandra in Medica. They do not know if she or any of the afflicted soldiers will remain under Ushara's sway when they reawaken. But now, more than ever, Hadrian is determined to slay the Cielsen in the name of the Quiet. He knows the final stand will now happen at Gododin, where they are sailing for at that very moment. Selena visits him in his quarters and reveals Ushara tried to seduce her as well. After the disaster at Danu, the Demiurge begins the 3-year journey back to Gododin. They have remained invisible to the Watcher still, thanks to the ship's unique architectural layout that sets it at just the right angle to the Watcher's dimension. However, it is obviously not infallible, as Ushara has managed to find her way on board. The remaining Tavrosi captains are also incredibly skeptical now of Hadrian's chances in the war. Only 3 ships of the Tavrosi fleet that had numbered dozens remain, and it seems to them their great sacrifice was for utterly no gain. The Tavrosi leave Hadrian's fleet, and the half-mortal's attention returns to preparing Gododin for the ultimate battle against Doriaca. Hadrian then reveals at last to his commanders his trump card, the Astrophage, also called the Sun Eater. It is capable of destroying a star by flying into it and creating a singularity. The result is a devastating supernova capable of obliterating a whole star system. Later, Hadrian visits the extrasolarian Here Soon Changed again. He learns the captain's name used to be Hereward Mott, of Avalon, and whose mother was the high priestess of the Temple of Nut at Phoenix. Soon Changed had lived on Earth, the original Earth, and he even reveals that the Mercani pyramids are still standing. It rocks Hadrian's world, for he and countless others had always believed Earth to be a desolate wasteland after the Foundation Wars. Here Soon Changed smiles, and tells Hadrian something called the Order founded the Chantry. This order is the hidden second power in the Empire, a secret military society that undoubtedly the Chantry Sentinels serve. Soon Changed then asserts, however, that with the Demiurge, Hadrian has become an undisputed power in the galaxy. The ship's weaponry and technology are unrivaled by anything in the Empire or Order, meaning if he really wanted to, Hadrian could take the throne for himself. The captain proposes an alliance between the two to rule over the galaxy, but Hadrian refuses to make a power grab. Soon Changed warns him that eventually the Watchers will destroy him, stating Karn Sagara had battled them for ages to no avail. Hadrian is silent for a moment, and asks if the captain has ever seen a Watcher die. Soon Changed concedes it is possible through great means, but it is a desperate uphill battle. This was a revelation reached by Karn Sagara, the reason he withdrew to Vorgassos. We are insects, all of us, bugs in a jar. Only Karn realized it. All his life, he thought he was hunting predators. He was only fighting shadows, the shadows of the hands outside the jar. That is what changed. He learned the fight is hopeless. The artificial nature of the universe is a difficult concept for Hadrian to comprehend, but he remains set on his mission. He departs Here Soon Changed, and some months later Cassandra regains consciousness. She is badly weakened, but there is no sign of Ushara lingering within her. The Danuan refugees opt to stay on the Demiurge under Hadrian's protection, not trusting the Empire. As the journey to Gododin continues, Hadrian settles a blood dispute between his Cielcen and Erchtani. Additionally, he learns Ramanthanu has taken the remaining Cielcen Otomno as its slave, and consequently set it with child. As they near Gododin at last, Selena convinces Hadrian to try calling Lorien again. Hadrian sends a transmission, appraising his friend of what happened on Danu and the build-up on Gododin, but no response comes. The Cielcen child is born, to be called Darathama. It is an odd sight on the Demiurge, and soon the massive ship sneaks into the Gododin system near its sun. There, Hadrian broadcasts his arrival to the Imperial ships above the planet, revealing he intentionally gave the Cielcen the location of Gododin to bait them into the decisive confrontation. A looping response comes in from Alexander, demanding the Demiurge prepare to be boarded. Alexander has a new title of Prince Regent, and to stall for time, Hadrian interrupts the prince's speech. A member of the Chantry Choir, Cantor Yod, emerges by Alexander's side. It is indicative of the Order's growing influence on the royal house. Alexander accuses Hadrian of forcing Selena into his bed, but is stunned when he learns she came of her own free will. Emperor William is still in feud, and Hadrian has no clue if he is dead or alive. Alexander's Martian legions close in on the Demiurge, but Hadrian has something prepared. He then reveals his masterstroke, for a little while ago, Hadrian had ordered for one of the Archontic weapons to be fired. It is what he deems a necessary show of strength, to convince the Empire and Chantry of the power of the Demiurge that ominously lays in his hands. The weapon was fired at the remote planet of Ident, chosen to minimize potential loss of life. Alexander then receives news of the planet's destruction, and is shocked into silence. Then, a brittle voice joins the transmission. It is Emperor William commanding both Hadrian and Alexander to stand down. All Imperial ships are ordered to back off, and the Emperor summons Hadrian and Selena to an immediate audience with him. They are promptly flown to the Aurora, where they are greeted by the Lord Chamberlain Nicephorus. Hadrian learns he killed 36 men over Ident, and begins to wonder if destroying the planet was premature. Hadrian and Selena are escorted by executors to a large hall. Ominously, Hadrian spots a half-finished painting by Vianello, the artist only awakened from fugue before Imperial ascents, and by that is a gilded fugue creche. A mechanical voice speaks to them, revealed to be the words of William but not his actual voice. Hadrian stares inside, seeing a mottled, misshapen body riddled with sores and protrusions. William himself is conscious, but can only communicate via a special console wired by his caretaker, Dr. Vrabel. William scolds Hadrian for destroying Iden, but approves of his strategy to bring the Cielsen to Gododin. Hadrian tells him what happened on Danu, revealing he did not fire the Archontic weapon there because Cassandra was on the planet against his orders. Hadrian then learns after Danu, 336 planets were attacked by the Cielsen. William also reveals he knows of the Choir's schemes, where they have even tried to assassinate him. His founding of Special Security, renewing Hapsis legions, and strengthening the Martians have all been safeguards against the Chantry. William even goes so far as to call Hadrian his friend, and though the ages have worn him down, he has but one chess piece remaining to fend off the vultures. He was not a man, as I have said. He was a monument, a colossus bestride all mankind. William names Hadrian as Auctor of the Realm, an unprecedented move that grants Hadrian the power to effectively sit upon the Solan throne as the representative of William. Hadrian must accept for the good of the realm, but is aware the vicious rumors surrounding him will only grow stronger, the net growing tighter as his climb continues upwards. It was not the Emperor who spoke through his machines, and that was what they would say, but some daemon, that I had bewitched him with the praxis of Vorgassos and the arts my witch woman had imparted to me. The Chantry and Alexander will undoubtedly be enraged at Hadrian's promotion, but William affirms there is no one he trusts more than Hadrian. He orders for Alexander to be brought to him, as Hadrian already begins to feel the greater world moving against him. The prince arrives, accompanied by the strategist of the Empire and Cantor Yod. Alexander immediately throws barbs at Hadrian, but is cowed into silence by William, whose booming voice now announces Hadrian acted with his blessing. Alexander then demands Hadrian turn the Demiurge over to the Empire, but is shocked again when William formally declares Hadrian as Auctor of the Imperium. Prince Chaim of Jad and the crowd approves, and recognizes Hadrian's new position, but Hadrian sees the lifeless, emotionless eyes of Alexander glaring at him. Thus, Hadrian then travels to Fort Din, where Cassandra acts as his herald and announces his arrival. In the name of his imperial radiance, the Emperor William the 23rd of the Aventine House, firstborn son of Earth, guardian of the solar system, king of Avalon, lord sovereign of the kingdom of Windsor and Exile, prince imperator of the arms of Orion, of Sagittarius, of Perseus, and Centaurus, conqueror of Norma, grand strategos of the legions of the sun, supreme lord of the cities of Forum, north star of the constellations of the blood Palatine, defender of the children of men, and servant of the servants of earth. His imperial shadow, his avatar, the Lord Auctor, Hadrian of the House Marlow, whose hand is his hand, whose voice is his voice. Lord Ammon Kosis, supreme legate of the Martian legions, strides out to greet Hadrian. The half-mortal deems Kosis to be loyal to Alexander, but not the Chantry as he is led to the War Council. Along with Hadrian comes Sir Aulus of the Executors, part of his new bodyguard contingent. Complete silence greets Hadrian, and he reunites with the great lords and commanders of the Empire. Alexander is also there and does not rise. With a cold, calculating voice, he openly calls Hadrian a traitor and murderer, as a figure of the Chantry, though not Cantor Yod, hovers by his side. The priest, named Tarquin, smiles evilly at Hadrian, who then threatens to tell the crowd of the true nature of Earth. It surprises the Prince Prior of the Chantry, who cannot believe Hadrian has learned the Order's greatest secret. But Hadrian does not continue on to reveal all the secrets, content with trapping the priest for the time being and deeming the overthrow of the Chantry to not be a part of his purpose. The moment over, Leonid Bartos then rages at Hadrian for bringing the Cielsen to Gododin. The chamber erupts into debate until Hadrian silently raises his hand. He tells them of the Watchers, then shows them a video of his fleet being torn apart by Ushara over Danu. It was as though a fault opened in the void itself. A crack like a bolt of lightning forked across the emptiness, shining like a ray of fire. It stretched for miles, shining with a light as bright as any sun. Then a ray of light sprang from it, reaching across the void to the nearest of Basander's ships. It did not move like any ordinary beam of light, but bent, as if it were a serpent indeed, stooping over its prey. Then its tip opened like a flower, like the fingers of some almighty hand. A great, celestial hand shone plain against the dark, its fingers as huge as ships themselves. The hall is silent, watching the hands of Ushara and her countless eyes effortlessly destroy the ships of the Imperium. Alexander and Tarkin remained impassive, while Hadrian's opponents voiced their skepticism and reiterate their gripes about his crimes. Hadrian has his executors restore order, then steps into the center of the chamber and demands action from the lords gathered around him. He sees out of the corner of his eye Alexander and his allies, Kossus and Lord Tarkin. Gododin must still be evacuated, but progress from even when Hadrian left for Danu is agonizingly slow. There are simply not enough ships that can be spared from the military, and the camps are still ravaged by plague and already meager resources of food and water. Edward meets with Hadrian and worries the Cielcen will bypass Gododin for Forum or Old Earth. Months pass, Hadrian bracing for the inevitable onslaught of Dora Yeka and the Cielcen. Conditions continue to worsen for the general populace, and Hadrian as Octor of the Realm is inconspicuously the imperial representation of the evacuation efforts. The darkness around me drew ever nearer, the circle tightening like the coils of a serpent about my neck. Hadrian cannot use the Demiurge, for it would jeopardize the refugees when battle erupts and also undoubtedly thrust them into the political games between him and the Chantry. Soon 2 years pass, the city slowly emptying with still no sign of the Cielcen. Rumors questioning Hadrian begin to swirl again, wondering if he had lied about the Cielcen coming in order to seize the throne for himself. Frustrated, Hadrian meets with Orphan and is at a loss as to why Dora Yeka has not come to Gododin. Orphan believes the Pale Prince may try to goad Hadrian into leaving his position, and urges him to stay on his course no matter what. But time drags on, and the food stores become dangerously low. Riots break out in nearby cities, but Catraith remains relatively stable. Prince Matthias cynically points out many in the slums may not be worth saving, and Ammon Kossus notes how they are now on a timer in the system. After some debate, Hadrian orders for a portion of the military to be put into fugue, and asks Alexander to distribute grain among the people as a political move. But Alexander denies his request, leaving the task to Hadrian. Thus, sometime later, Hadrian travels through the city with Princess Helena to help deliver rations to the people. As they pass through the crowds, Hadrian hears cries of murderer and killer ring out. Protesters against him also countered with cult followings in Hadrian's name. The crowd presses their vehicle, becoming more hostile, and then Hadrian hears a single shot ring out. The angry masses surge forwards, and Hadrian has their driver plow through the crowd to make it back to Fort Din. However, their car becomes surrounded by rioters, who flip the vehicle upside down. Then, Sir Aulus and the executors spring into action, and with cold, silent efficiency cut through the crowd like butchers. Hadrian and Selena crawl out of the car and flee into the alleys, onlookers cursing them both for ravaging their world. A small mob confronts them and the executors, but Hadrian is hesitant to order Aulus into a killing spree again. Seeing an opportunity, a man rushes forwards and clubs Aulus in the head with a sledgehammer, crumpling the mighty knight. Hadrian draws his sword and with Selena cuts through the crowd to escape. As they run, he sees banners with red stars, much like the ones in the visions where he is an emperor of mankind. A young boy then appears and guides Hadrian and Selena into a nearby building, along with 2 executors carrying the wounded Aulus. At last, the Urchtani arrive and are able to extract them all, but Aulus dies from his injuries. Upon seeing the boy who rescued them has green eyes, Hadrian asks them to take him too. Catraith burns to the rioters, an undeniable blow to Hadrian's already tenuous political standing. And the men that cursed the names of Earth and Empire, of Avent and Marlow and all the rest would curse more bitterly still, though I bent the Empire and Jad and the rest as hard as I could in the cause of their salvation. I knew then, even then, that our efforts, my efforts, would not be remembered, only our failures. Hadrian and Selena return at last to Fort Din, where they learn the Prince Regent is planning to head into the city to lead pacification efforts. It is shrewdly astute by Alexander, and now Hadrian and Cassandra soon run into Alexander and his delegate. Alexander takes the moral high ground, as Cassandra blunders and accuses him of setting the riots up. Hadrian's reputation has taken perhaps an irreversible blow, for it was his executors and Martians that were seen killing the crowd. The concrete facts of the event matter little now, simply how they are portrayed by the chantry. The streets of Catraeth run red with blood and fire, and thousands now curse Hadrian as a devilish world breaker. The situation as a whole on Gododin worsens, and Hadrian is forced to suggest they pull their troops into orbit to minimize the risk of the plague spreading. It is another carefully orchestrated trap by the chantry, for the planet will certainly fall to riots if they leave. Lord Tarkin proposes a phased withdrawal from Gododin to the core systems. He deftly suggests accelerating the evacuation, and then turns to look at Hadrian. He asks Hadrian why the Demiurge cannot be open to refugees, putting him on the spot. Hadrian must justify why the massive ship, which can hold millions, will not be offered as a point of refuge. It is another attack on his public image, even though Hadrian, Tarkin, and Alexander all know the Demiurge is destined for battle, not harbor. Hadrian fires back at Tarkin, claiming the chantry will embed spies on the ship. But in doing so, he once more takes the back foot, as Tarkin is able to pivot to Hadrian being more focused on politics rather than saving humanity. It is a masterstroke by the chantry, and the room begins to turn against Hadrian. I felt a pit form in my stomach. These people, these miserable people, these creatures I had fought all my life to save, had twice given my life to save. Had it been worth it? Were they worth it? 1,000 years of whispers, 1,000 years of poison, had done its work at last. Every rumor, every calumny, every black little truth compounded in that instant, fell upon me in that moment, and I felt my shoulders buckle, back bend beneath the weight. They said that I had caused the Emperor's sickness, that I had lied about the Cielcen threat, that the map was some conceit I'd concocted with the extra Solarians to deceive the Armada, to isolate the Emperor and the court on the frontier to better win the throne. Hadrian has no way, or perhaps never did, of dispelling the slanders against his name. Resigned, he orders Cassandra and his executors to escort him back to the Demiurge, where he states he will take the fight to the Cielcen. Hadrian returns to the mighty ship, but he has precious few allies. Lysander will be stopped from helping him by Alexander, and Jad and Lorien have their hands tied as well. Talking with Edward, Hadrian suddenly worries the chantry know of the Cielcen location, and are hiding something big from the rest of the Empire. He and Edward rush to Orphan, believing the Cielcen may indeed have attacked Forum. Then, on the bridge a transmission comes in. It is a shaken Prince Alexander and Matthias, and Alexander seems to be in a state of disbelief. Hadrian and Cassandra immediately recognize it to be theater, but then Alexander drops a bombshell. He reveals the city of Catraeth has been razed entirely, and the blame has fallen entirely on Hadrian. It is a blatant lie at the cost of countless lives, and to buy time, Hadrian offers a surrender. They have some 10 hours to formulate a plan before the Martians come to take them in. As they hover over the planet, Hadrian sees evidence antimatter was used on the evacuation camps, with Fort Din conveniently intact. They continue to receive no response from Prince Chaim or the Emperor on the Aurora. Hadrian summons Captain Soonchange to the bridge, and asks him to help him strike against the chantry. Hadrian needs to know what the chantry are hiding from them, and asks Soonchange to attack the Order's computers. Horrifying Orphan, Hadrian proposes Soonchange interface with the main computer of the Demiurge and wage a mechanical war against the chantry and extract all the information from their databases. Soonchange agrees on the condition he is freed afterwards. Preparations are made, with Orphan warning Hadrian they do not know what Soonchange is truly capable of. Their attack begins, with Orphan and Soonchange going non-verbal. Then, a foreign voice emanates from Soonchange, for the vicious battle had happened in the span of an instant. The voice dares Hadrian to cut down Soonchange, and is revealed to be another will that seems to be called D. Orphan warns Hadrian soon D may be able to take the Demiurge. Cassandra surges forward and cuts the cords binding Soonchange to the computer column. Orphan rises to its feet, revealing Soonchange was successful in his mission. Then, a knife missile rises into the air and strikes it, wounding the creature. Hadrian rushes up to defend Orphan, for the Chantry Daemon seems to be trying to kill Orphan for the brain-dead body of Soon Changed. More knife missiles appear and are fended off, and Orphan's life is saved. The Chantry Daemon is dispelled, which Orphan reveals is a copy of a much stronger will, effectively a god. Additionally, it is revealed the Chantry's power is so immense that they have access to every comm and transmitter in the system. Hadrian realizes the Chantry effectively controls their entire datasphere, meaning they are in the dark. With horror in his eyes, he turns to Orphan. There was pain in those twin faces, fear in each set of eyes. One set closed, the other averted its gaze, and it spoke words to change the universe, to change man's destiny forever. The eternal city is fallen, it said. It is revealed Forum was destroyed by Doriaca 2 years ago. Its ruin had happened entirely without Hadrian's knowledge. Not even the Emperor knows, for the Prince Regent Alexander and the Chantry have hidden the news all this time. Then everyone looks up, and notices the knife missiles from D have slashed the Demiurge's computer. Nonetheless, Hadrian knows they must respond to the Chantry's attack, and prepares to use his powers to do so. Putting the corpse of Soon Changed in a bag, Hadrian prepares to stride across the higher dimensions of hyperspace. On a tower far from the heart of the Demiurge, and under the watch of his closest officers, Hadrian steps into the oceans of time. He prays to the Absolute to aid him, and then sees himself, but with green eyes. Then the eyes of the Watchers find him, and Hadrian and the other him run. The ruined, stony body of Doriaca appears, gloating at the fall of Forum. The other Hadrian pushes him to a wall of light, and Hadrian stumbles towards it. He looks back to see himself draw a red blade as Doriaca and the Watchers close in. Hadrian continues on the path forwards, and soon comes across a crying Selena, who refuses to believe Hadrian would have bombed the city. Hadrian continues on, simply passing through the walls and bulkheads of the Aurora until he reaches the hall containing William's creche. Shocking Dr. Vrabel, he demands the Emperor be awoken as excubitors and Martians rush inside. Nicephorus appears, and reveals the Chantry Daemon had leaked a fake video confession from Hadrian. Time is running short, and Hadrian asserts he has never wanted the throne for himself. He shows them Soon Changed's body, and warns the Chantry have complete control over all the communications in the Empire. Nicephorus is stunned to hear of the fall of Forum, and is told the Chantry ship Ararat's datasphere has been copied onto the neural implants of Soon Changed. Nicephorus is shaken, for with Forum destroyed, the viable pool of heirs for William has been constricted considerably. The Androgen agrees to awaken William, knowing the process will hasten the Emperor's death considerably. Video evidence is shown of Forum's fall, some 500 world ships burning it to the ground. Emperor William is awoken, and emerges escorted by Kossis. Alexander rushes forwards, but is immediately reprimanded by William. Images of Forum in flames are shown to the onlooking court, and still Alexander and Tarquin try to cast blame on Hadrian. William sees right through it, and demands the daemon on the Ararat be destroyed in front of him. Hadrian sees civil war brewing between the Empire and Chantry, all while the Cielcen rush to Gododin to sweep away the scraps. To aid William, he steps up and claims he will destroy the daemon and all of the Chantry ships, blaming them for the fall of Forum. Hadrian exposes the true nature of Earth, and openly calls Alexander a puppet of the Chantry. Alexander draws a sword, and Hadrian dares him to swing. The prince complies, but the blade simply passes through Hadrian. The court is stunned, and William then has Alexander be led away. Tarquin is then summoned forwards, as Cantor Yod looks on in the crowd. William brings down his crushed sarcophagus, and holds up his hand for Tarquin to kiss. It is a death sentence, for Tarquin will contract the plague, or die if he refuses. Tarquin quietly kisses William's ring, and the Emperor addresses the onlooking crowd. He declares the Chantry have deceived the Empire, for Earth is still a green paradise, and commands that every Chantry ship be handed over to the Martian legions. The daemon on the Ararat is killed, and it seems for the time being the Chantry has been set back. Weeks pass, and many of the Chantry clergymen are imprisoned under Fort Din. The Emperor clings to life, and for his safety is moved to Gododin's sister planet of Sinon. Hadrian accompanies him, and flies with Cassandra down to a massive fortress embedded deep in a crater, the final bastion of war for the looming battle. After some time, Hadrian joins the crowd for a momentous occasion. Despite his condition, Emperor William has risen to his feet to stand before his people one last time. Hadrian looks on affectionately, and has finally come to regard the emperor as his friend. How fitting it was that at the last, on the last day that world would ever see, in the evening of his empire, that he should stand on his own 2 feet. William makes the long and proud, albeit stumbling, walk from his shuttles to the doors of the mighty fortress. Hadrian is in awe of his will, his strength, as they descend underground. There, William shows him a massive arsenal of atomic weapons, some 41,472 dating all the way back to the 8th millennium. Intelligence reports confirm the Cielcen are en route to Gododin, and Hadrian finally tells the Emperor of the Astrophage. He believes Gododin to be lost already, for a single Cielcen world ship of the 1500 estimated to be in the Armada can destroy the planet if it crashes. The Emperor agrees with the assessment, and Hadrian also asserts a portion of the fleet must be sacrificed to keep the Cielcen in the kill zone. William then shows Hadrian, along with Cassandra, Selena, and Nicephorus, to another secret of the Empire. Their party approaches a door at the end of a long corridor. William takes off his gauntlet, and the door takes a sample of his blood to open. It is revealed there are 989 such bunkers scattered across the Imperium, a staggeringly large network of unfathomable cost. Inside are banks of computers, and William reveals the key to his ultimate power over humanity. The strength of my Imperium is not counted in legions or in missiles, but in blood. William tells a stunned Hadrian the Empire forced the lesser lords of humanity to become sterilized, a more effective way of control rather than taking political hostages. Within the computers are the genomes of every Palatine bloodline, as well as codes for RNA retrovirals that can reverse the modifications made to their genomes. This unprecedented power is the reason the Chantry hasn't killed William yet, for it is only with his blood the databanks can be accessed. Hadrian asks if there are backups, and William and Nicephorus share a glance but utter nothing. Then, William tells Selena she must rule after him, for he does not trust Alexander. All other suitable heirs were killed on Forum, and Selena shakingly tells her father she has never wanted the throne. But then William turns to Hadrian, who immediately understands. He thinks of Valka for a fleeting moment, as the Emperor says Hadrian and Selena will be wed, Hadrian to become imperial consort. It is perhaps the best move William can make to preserve the Empire, but one that will surely cement the end of Hadrian. Left with no other option, Hadrian agrees to the betrothal, knowing Selena assuredly will as well. The two are wed before William, Nicephorus, and Cassandra, meaning also the genetic Palatine keys will eventually be passed to Hadrian when William dies. I bent on one knee before him, not as a soldier, but as a son. You are, I think, the best man I have ever known, I told him. Save them, Hadrian, William said. All of them, if you can. Hadrian and Selena, husband and wife, then leave William in the bunker, knowing their ascension will undoubtedly be met with fury and violence. They return to Gododin, keeping the betrothal and Selena's new status as heir a secret. The atomics on Sinon are distributed throughout the Imperial fleet, and Hadrian rejoins the War Council. Ammon Kosas renews his vows to the Emperor, for removing him risks alienating a significant portion of the Martians. The princes Alexander and Matthias are detained and put into fugue, and Hadrian prepares for the last stages of his battle plan, his great and almighty purpose. After some time, reports come in of the Cielcen fleet passing Tenba, meaning it is only weeks before they arrive at the Gododin system. The planet itself is still not evacuated, and then surprising everyone, Lorien Aristides arrives in the Mistwalker. Hadrian and William meet Lorien on Gododin, who formally offers his aid in the fight against the Cielcen. He tells them Laterra has fallen into anarchy, broken into squabbling warlords and factions. Lorien demands his remaining Round Table fleet be recognized as the official government of the Norman Stars after the war, which William agrees to. After several days, Hadrian is finally able to catch Lorien alone. Lorien demands to know why he was never told the true nature of Caelin Herondotes while Hadrian was in Laterra, that betrayal stinging him deep even to this day. Hadrian does not tell his old friend of the Watchers, Chantry, or of the Astrophage, but the two are united in their war against the Pale. Sometime later, Hadrian and Selena stand on the Demiurge, gazing out the window as they hover over Gododin. It is a quiet moment, one that is suddenly interrupted when Hadrian begins to hear bells ringing. Orphan patches into his comm, warning Hadrian the Cielsen have arrived. It turns out the Pale have taken the Imperium completely by surprise and scored a devastating blow on the Armada already. In a move of sheer genius, Doriaga has used its world ships and flown them at warp speed straight through the unaware Imperial ships. The preparations of humanity, years of planning, are thrown out the window as many of their massive weapons of war are destroyed without firing a single shot. Thousands of vessels are destroyed in the initial attack, killing millions. 12 world ships appear over Gododin, a disturbingly small number as flashes of light, each marking the death of another ship, flare outside the Demiurge. Hadrian scrambles to see who survived the attack, seeing no sign of the Watcher's presence. Orphan concludes the Cielsen seem to know where humanity would station, and Hadrian orders it to ready the Darklight weapon. Prince Caim patches in, having survived the initial attack. Hadrian orders him to hire space to avoid the destroyed warships as Albedo is also ready to defend the Demiurge. Lorien's roundtable fleet of Sojourners is presumed to have jumped into warp, and it will be some time before they can return to the fight. A swarm of Cielsen craft rushes towards the Demiurge, and Orphan warns Hadrian Albedo will not be ready in time. Hadrian orders the massive ship to fly under the Horde back towards Gododin, and still he cannot sense the Watchers. Albedo is at last launched, flying with incomprehensible precision and speed. It destroys 2 world ships and countless smaller vessels and missiles in a mere 6 seconds. Bassanderlin hails Hadrian, the grizzled commander in awe of the Archontic weapon. Hadrian orders him to get clear of Gododin, and then finally senses inhuman eyes watching him. Then, a massive world ship emerges from warp and slams directly into Gododin, utterly destroying the planet in a suicide strike. You have heard it said that it was Hadrian Marlowe who destroyed Gododin along with its star, but it is not so. You know what you've been made to know. By my enemies, by the lords and princes of Mother Earth, by he who sits the throne. Hadrian broadcasts to all who can hear, rallying them to fly to Sinon and regroup with the Emperor. He then turns and notices the transmission of Prince Caim, his friend of centuries, is gone. Steeling himself, Hadrian dons a suit of pure black armor and takes the transmitter for astrophage. However, it will be some time before they can reach Sinon. An urgent transmission comes in with even worse news. The fleet at Sinon has also been attacked, but by Ushara. Godlike hands reach through space itself and destroy the ships with ease, videos and distress signals flooding the feed on the Demiurge. In a desperate move, Hadrian sends Albedo at the Watcher. Albedo slashed the void between them, hurried back across the miles, a million at a stride. There was nothing in the system that could have overtaken her flight, nothing faster, nothing, save Ushara. The beast had seen her coming, flaring in the night, and reaching out, as I did, across time. With one spectral hand, she caught it, held Albedo as a child might trap a buzzing fly, and she crushed it, and cast its ruin upon the void. Still no word has come from Emperor William, and Orphan then proposes they use the weapon Artemisian against Ushara. If they are able to score a direct hit, Ushara's waveform might be captured. Edward informs Hadrian Doriaga's main fleet has at last been spotted near Sinon, and is taking fire from Lorien's roundtable fleet. The Demiurge jumps to warp, and launches Artemisian into the very heart of Ushara. The ship arrives to find the Watcher gone, and Orphan declares it dead. Hadrian is skeptical, but then William finally makes contact. The Emperor despairs at the loss of Gododin, and orders Hadrian to prepare the astrophage. Hadrian passes the responsibility to Orphan, stating he will instead confront Doriaga again. At the last moment before he departs, Cassandra finds Hadrian and insists on accompanying him. They find a shuttle holding Ramanthanu and Otomno, and take the Cielsen with them out of the Demiurge in search of Darantun. The Emperor engages the main Cielsen fleet above Sinon as a distraction, utilizing his atomic arsenal. Ushara, revealed to have survived the Artemisian, falls upon the Imperial ships as well. Hadrian rises, and to the despair of the onlooking Cassandra, steps out of the shuttle and into the higher dimensions only he can travel in. He finds himself on the cold world of Darantun, hovering near the planet Yuwain. Hadrian moves forward, the great battle raging over his head as in his mind he hears the familiar roars of Red Company, ages gone. He encounters 3 Cielsen and wordlessly approaches them. They beat him down and demand to know where his ship is, mistakenly believing Hadrian flew in. One of the Cielsen draws Hadrian's sword, but the shadow of a watcher emerges behind it and cuts off its arm. All the Cielsen are killed, and Hadrian speaks with the shadow, believing it to be Mudanar. It demands he submit, and then vanishes. Sometime later, more Cielsen arrive to detain Hadrian, led by the notorious Viadan general Hushansa. Despite its might, Hushansa is far beneath Hadrian's concern at this point as it leads him through the city and the palace of Darantun. Millions of Cielsen watch their procession as they pass into the palace of Dar Iagon. As Hadrian walks past the statues of the Watchers, the gods of the Cielsen, it is with horror he feels all of their eyes on him. They are present within the idols, watching Hadrian and also seeming to bow to Mudanar. Hadrian enters a chamber of deadly quiet, filled with many dead Cielsen, all in the kneeling position. A single bridge spans a chasm to a throne within a dome of white stone, where Hadrian can see the shadow of Mudanar and Doriaga. Doriaga calls Hadrian kinsman as he crosses the bridge, bidding him to join Ushara as it had joined Mudanar. The Pale Prince is confident in its victory over humanity, and Hadrian in the gloom can make out Doriaga's head eroding away. Beneath it also crawls a Xenobite slave, which Hadrian realizes is one of the Hakurani. It is called Radasa, and Hadrian listens as Doriaga reveals it wishes to escape the universe dictated by the Absolute. It, through the Watchers, can no longer be bound to the power of creation and can now find the void beyond the void. Doriaga refuses to be a slave for the Absolute, claiming Utanash has sent Hadrian to his death. Hadrian spurns Doriaga again and again, until the Pale Prince grabs him by the throat. Hadrian can see 3 eyes staring at him, the 2 of Doriaga and the 1 of Mudanar within the husk of its body. Preparing himself to die, he closes his eyes, but the grip on him is suddenly loosed. A massive pulse echoes throughout the room, killing the power to his armor. The Hakurani Radasa grabs a drinking horn from nearby Doriaga's throne and smashes it in the head. Hadrian looks up to see the prophet's head destroyed, his ancient foe suddenly dead. Radasa grabs Hadrian and urges him to flee, as fingers begin to slither out of Doriaga's body, followed by an arm and a hand. Hadrian grabs his sword and cuts Radasa free, also noticing Hushansa lies dead from the powerful pulse. Then, a dark form begins crawling towards them, for it seems Mudanar has at last been reborn. It attacks Hadrian, who fends it off as Radasa warns him Ushara is on her way as well. Hadrian realizes he is actually fighting Doriaga's child with Mudanar as they grapple on the bridge. Radasa pushes Hadrian towards the exit, putting itself between him and the monstrous infant. It grabs Radasa and begins to crush it as the Hakurani continues to plead for Hadrian to flee, or all will be lost. Hadrian steels himself and cuts the bridge, sending the infant plunging into the chasm to its death. He turns to leave, but finds Ushara has come. A dark form, another Hadrian, also appears behind him and again compels him to join Ushara. But Hadrian is resolute, his will absolute, and he shuns them both. I smiled. I smiled because there, at the end of everything, it was so easy to refuse. Ushara attacks him in a blind rage, but Hadrian simply takes a single step forwards. He at last draws Edward's transmitter and sends the signal for Orphan to fire the Voidmaker. He plunges through the wells of time and space, falling through the walls of Darantun. I looked up, and time stretched about me. I saw the Watchers peering down, not understanding their undoing, the doom I had brought upon their house. Ushara's eyes met mine. I smiled. Hadrian floats in darkness, believing at last he has vanquished the Watchers. A strange ship drifts by him, and he grabs onto it. Hadrian climbs inside, and a massive face appears to him, uttering, "Do what must be. Seek hardship." He suddenly awakens back on the surface of Darantun, denied death and sent back again by the Absolute. Hadrian stands and walks, for though the fighting continues above him, for all intents and purposes, his own battles are done. Orphan speaks in his calm, informing Hadrian he will be picked up by the shuttle soon. Hadrian, alone with his thoughts, thinks of the billions that must still die in the name of the Absolute. His musings slowly turn to a hatred of the Absolute, and he even vows to destroy the creator of the universe. An eerie smile begins to creep across his face, but Hadrian stops it. He now knows Ushara somehow survived, and has fought off her attempted corruption yet again. "Your day is done," I roared. "Nothing but death remains." She let out a piercing cry, a fell music like the ringing of monstrous bells, so loud I felt Lorien could hear her light minutes away. What was I, measured against a being of such enormity? Hadrian uses the transmitter to signal for the Voidmaker to fire again, as Ushara strikes at him with godly might and fury. He stands untouched and unharmed, evading her clawing attacks through the infinities of time. Through sheer strength of will, Hadrian survives Ushara, feeling her sheer, pure hatred for him. He buys time for the Voidmaker to fire again, and with a final scream, Ushara vanishes. Several minutes pass, and a shuttle then arrives. Cassandra disembarks, and tells Hadrian Lorien is waiting for him. However, when they arrive on the Mistwalker, Lorien draws a weapon on them both. He reveals he has made a deal with the Chantry to turn them over in exchange for the safety of his people. Lord Tarquin's forces are storming the Demiurge as they speak, and Hadrian cannot believe it as Lorien claims Edward is also a traitor. Furious, Cassandra charges Lorien, who fires and blows her head clean off. Hadrian, overcome with grief, rushes Lorien and strangles him to death. However, he then suddenly finds himself kneeling on Darantun again. The shuttle arrives once more, with a very much alive Cassandra. Hadrian, not sure entirely what is going on, tells her they cannot go to the Mistwalker. However, their shuttle is captured by Lateran dragoons, and Hadrian again watches as Cassandra is shot and killed. Hadrian becomes stuck in a loop of time, beginning from Darantun and ending each and every time with Cassandra's death. Again and again he watches her die no matter how he tries to vary the vision. They are never able to make it back to the Demiurge, and Hadrian begins to wonder if he is trapped in a hell where he cannot die. Then, Hadrian is at last thrown through a series of visions, in which he sees the deaths of Selena and Orphan, the fall of Demiurge and passing of William, and the ascension of Alexander to the throne. Visions of his would-be Black Empire at war dance across his mind. It is a last trick by Mudinar and Ushara to trap Hadrian in a cycle of suffering and despair. But at last he is able to fight the visions off, declaring the end has not yet come for him. A light appears around him once more, indicating the Voidmaker has actually fired again. Hadrian leaps away from Darantun using his powers, but Ushara appears and tackles him to the ground. He struggles to trigger the transmitter as they wrestle for the device. Countless variations of Hadrian strain to find the switch, his arm nearly tearing from its socket. But Hadrian succeeds, and Ushara and Mudinar flee. Ushara lets out a terrible scream as she escapes. The Voidmaker deals her a great wound, but does not kill her entirely as there had not been enough time to properly calibrate it. Hadrian lies wounded on the surface of Darantun, as above him the Voidmaker is destroyed by Ushara's escape. A bright light breaks through into the universe from the higher dimensions, resembling a massive white city. Cassandra at last comes down to the surface, with Ramanthanu and Otomno. They fly away from Darantun, which is destined for destruction as it had collided with the Voidmaker. Hadrian tells Cassandra he believes all the Watchers except for Mudinar and Ushara are destroyed, and quietly wonders if Lorien is really plotting to betray them. They chart a course for the Mistwalker, receiving a comm from Lorien himself. Hadrian decides to trust his friend, and tells him about the Sun Eater and his plan to destroy the Cielsan fleet with it. Lorien proves his trustworthiness to Hadrian's great relief when he curses the Chantry. Then, an unidentified object appears near Uwain. A great scream resembling countless bells emanates through space. It is Mudinar reborn, and Hadrian orders everyone to get to warp and make for Sinon and the Emperor. Hadrian's shuttle jumps, with Lorien opting to stay behind to launch his atomics at Mudinar. Hadrian arrives at Sinon, hailing the Aurora and contacting the Demiurge to begin preparing the astrophage. To his great relief, Hadrian is allowed to board the Aurora and learns the Imperial fleet held Sinon, shattering the Cielsan fleet there. Then, another message comes in. The air turned almost to amber, to crystal as I hung on the next words. Orphan's words. The words I had been waiting all my life to hear. The weapon is primed. Hadrian flies back to the Aurora to deliver the news of the death of Siriani Dorayeka. He brings with him Ramanthanu and Otomno, shocking the Martians gathered there. Visiting Ammon Kosis, Hadrian tells him of Lorien's gambit to take on Mudanar alone, while revealing nothing of the astrophage. Alarms suddenly go off, and a junior officer rushes up to them. The Cielsen have somehow appeared around Sinon and launched another massive attack. Hadrian watches the telegraph display, and is bewildered as more ships seem to materialize from nowhere, leaving no warp wakes. Ammon Kos assembles his forces, and then whirls around to question if Ramanthanu and Otomno have betrayed them. The Imperial forces are in utter disarray, though no world ships have arrived as of yet. News of another unidentified object arriving rings out as an all-too-familiar light opens in the space above Sinon. I felt his presence before I saw it. The malice and the light, and looking up, I saw a shadow moving in that brightness, and knew the thing for what it was. The head of Mudanar, his shoulders, arms, hands. Mudanar appears before the Aurora, stunning everyone on the bridge into silence. It is a veritable giant breaking through space, but it is the Watcher's form that captures everyone's attention. It was a man. I felt his will and vision seize on me, and a moment later that face turned and looked straight at me. It was my own face. Mudanar, taking a form that resembles Hadrian, further erodes the half-mortal standing in the Imperium, only feeding the salacious rumors swirling around his figure. Atomics are launched against the Watcher to no avail, as it swings a mighty hand towards the Aurora. Hadrian uses his powers to save the entire ship, fighting in a terrible conflict of wills even as the panicked Martians begin to question his allegiance. As Hadrian battles Mudanar, visions overtaken. The dead of his past, Kat, Valka, Gen, and many others all visit him as he suddenly begins to see and sense through the mind of Mudanar. Hadrian finds himself in an old city, carrying a bundle with a misshapen being over poisoned water. It seems to call him Yama, which means egg in Sevatayu. He is whisked to a dark cavern, where he finds another misshapen creature and offers it food. It was small, but they all were, when measured against the vastness of the all that he had made. There was enough energy hidden in a single atom of hydrogen to start a planet burning. There was more than enough in this creature to burn everything away. I would make its kind great. Hadrian leaves the creature and returns to the being in the city, and refers to it as his maker. The maker asks him to let her die, and more visions pass. The creature in the dark cavern is revealed to be the first of the Cielsen, Mudanar's revenge against the Absolute to take back from the Creator. Well, I could remember all I'd lost. The world above, the world before. Each of us had been made to a purpose, glorious and wonderful. My sister was made to shepherd the stars, to keep her flock in its place, and to tend them, that they might never die. She had been radiant in her beginning, her smile as beautiful as suns. Mudanar, however, was made to serve and guide the children of the Absolute. In them he saw greatness, but also saw they were meant to die, to wither away in the name of the Absolute. It is revealed this very first people were the Vayartu. Everything I'd been made to build, everything I'd been made for would be lost, undone by time in time. This he called wisdom. How black my fury then, and my despair. And from this anger, Mudanar had decided to fashion his own ending, to save his people. The Maker seems to be his mother, who is dying. Against Mudanar's wishes, she compels him, Yama, to consume her very being. Hadrian feels a sense of pity, realizing not even the Watchers were evil in the beginning. He senses the deep grief of Mudanar, but also knows the Watcher had nonetheless made his own choice to betray the Absolute. Hadrian shrugs off the will of the Watcher and dispels the visions. Mudanar vanishes back into hyperspace as an exhausted Hadrian collapses into a chair. There will be no rest for him though, as Nicephorus arrives and immediately summons him to the royal apartments. Hadrian is quickly taken to the Emperor, whose last moments are minutes away. He tells William Doriaga is dead, but the Watchers remain. It marks the dawn of a new age in history, where mankind can no longer ignore the proof that eldritch gods exist. William states the astrophage must be used, but says he will keep the Aurora in the system. He says outright Hadrian must sit the throne as emperor, not as the consort of Selena. It will set the stage for a great conflict with the Order on Earth, but William is willing to take that risk for a long-lasting peace. Nicephorus approaches them with 8 gold rings, as William reveals the Palatine genomes have already been coded to Hadrian's blood. William tells Hadrian he must destroy the Chantry, as he realizes his wishes matter little in the grand scheme of things. Hadrian is, perhaps always was, destined to reforge humanity in a new era of peace. There are no alternative solutions, and Hadrian agrees to take the throne. He takes the rings, and Emperor William XXIII stands a final time. He bows to Hadrian, decreeing him the new emperor as Nicephorus chants his new titles. His imperial radiance, the Emperor Hadrian Alexander of the House Marlow-Victorian, King of Earth and Mars, of Avalon, of Delos, of Tyrans, Ptolemy, Nessus, and Marinus, Archduke of Shakespeare, Duke of Renaissance, Prince Imperator of the Arms of Orion, of Sagittarius, of Perseus, and Centaurus, Grand Strategos of the Legions of the Sun, North Star of the constellations of the Blood Palatine, Defender of the children of men, and Servant of the servants of earth. William returns to his deathbed, the passing of the scepter of power complete. Hadrian never sees him again, remarking how even at the end, his spirit remained unbroken. In him was the glory of man undimmed, untouched by disease, by suffering, made brighter by suffering. By that strength he had ruled, and held fast his crumbling empire, that it might endure until that final day, when I would come to shatter it, as the Absolute intended. Hadrian, Hisielson, and Nicephorus immediately moved to depart the Aurora, knowing their situation is still dangerous. With 2 executors, they leave the hall and are immediately confronted by Ammon Kosas and a contingent of Martians. Kosas outright accuses Hadrian of murdering the emperor, even though William is still technically alive. Hadrian realizes that Alexander has undoubtedly been freed, as Kosas refuses to accept Hadrian's ascension to heir. He demands Hadrian surrender the Demiurge and accept exile with Cassandra. Alexander himself steps forwards, hatred glowing in his eyes. He does not listen to Nicephorus as Cantor Yod also appears behind him. Hadrian states the throne is a lesser prize in the scope of the universe, outraging Alexander, who is quickly quieted by Yod. Hadrian tells Yod humanity is doomed no matter what. My eyes were on Prince Alexander, the man who would be king, so easily muzzled. Cantor Yod then ensnares Hadrian, agreeing to let him go. However, he takes Cassandra as prisoner, stating once Hadrian defeats the Hisielson, he will return and hand over the Demiurge to the Chantry in exchange for his daughter. Cassandra is mollified, but Hadrian has a revelation. I had never seen this moment, had never foreseen it. Never in all my visions had I seen the manner of my ascension, the moment I took the throne. I had not seen Cassandra there. Here then was the final test, the final trial. Hadrian agrees to the terms, bewildering Nicephorus and Cassandra. Additionally, it condemns the Palatine bloodlines to fall into the hands of the Chantry, but to Hadrian those matter little. Hadrian walks forward, to the front of the Martian line. Then, he draws his sword and swings and kills Ammon Kosas where he stands. Yod simply smiles as battle breaks out. Cassandra and the executors spring into action as Alexander is whisked away. Then, inexplicably, Jadian war cries ring out, breaking Yod's composure. Cassandra and Ramanthanu charge Yod and kill him, as Prince Khaim of Jad arrives to the battle. The Martians are slaughtered, and Khaim is stunned when Hadrian shows him his gold rings. They race to get off the Aurora, but by ill fate the Hisielson manage to board the ship. The executors cut a path of blood through the enemy, and they manage to find the black shuttle of the Demiurge. However, it is surrounded by several hundred Martians, effectively trapping them between the Imperial troops and Hisielson. Hadrian calls the daemon in the shuttle, and orders it to open fire on the Martians. However, the ship's systems are too damaged to escape the Aurora, and their party must now find the Jadian ship instead. They fight on, but encounter a prince of the Chantry and 4 of the deadly sentinels. The Cielson forces fall upon the Chantry warriors, but the Prince Prior simply holds up his hand and one of the chimeras falls dead instantaneously. Alexander enters Hadrian's private comm, telling him to surrender. He does not want Hadrian to escape, to use his weapon, out of fear it will attract the sight of the countless other watchers. Hadrian ends the comm as the Martians slam the doors guarding the ship shut. They break through to find all the Martians torn apart. It seems to be the work of Ushara, and they carry on to the Jadian ship. Crazed Martians and the arriving Cielson attack their party as Hadrian is rushed inside. Hadrian commands them to go to warp, an action that will damage the Aurora and also symbolize an act of war against the Empire. Their ship frantically lifts off as crazed soldiers possessed by Mudinar and Ushara swarm them. A Cielson leaps from the shadows and catches Cassandra by surprise, but Ramanthanu tackles it to the ground. The Jadian ship Nemon escapes the Aurora, but Ramanthanu is mortally wounded and perishes at Hadrian's feet. They jump to warp, heavily damaging the Aurora but making it back to the Demiurge. Hadrian considers the possibility their jump killed William and Alexander, meaning Jad is essentially at war against the Empire. Selena greets them when they land and learns her father and presumably Alexander are both dead. Hadrian and Selena recognize their new statuses as Emperor and Empress, and Hadrian then prepares himself for the moment his whole life has been building towards. He descends to the pilot throne of the Demiurge, and there takes the seat from Orphan. Edward, Nima, and many others are there as witnesses. Everyone was present, there to witness the end of days. The moment passes almost exactly as it has in the countless visions Hadrian has had. He reflects for a brief moment, wondering if everything was predetermined to lead him to this moment from the very beginning. I smiled, recalled that I had smiled in my vision too. Do what must be done. Orphan, I said, and stood, breaking the vision in my hands. Prepare to fire Astrophage. Would you have him be a tyrant? Ragama's voice, so warm and melancholy, sounded in my ear. Deny you the freedom to choose? I was free, had been free all my life. Only the past is written. Hadrian utters the fateful words to Orphan, fire at will. Astrophage is launched, and plunges into the heart of Gododine's star. Hadrian and Orphan do not know how long it will take for the sun to be destroyed, and know the fleet must remain in the system to keep the Cielson from catching on. Hadrian is willing to sacrifice up to 1 billion of humanity's soldiers in an act of murder to destroy the Cielson. Edward is distraught, but Hadrian holds him at bay. With the Astrophage, he also hopes the Chantry ships will be destroyed as well. Orphan detects that the Aurora is still intact, and then the Chantry ship Ararat appears and attacks the Demiurge. Hadrian gives orders for telegraphs to be sent to the Jadians and Lorien to flee the system. The Demiurge is then rocked by a devastating blow, and it turns out the Chantry has somehow obtained the Darklight weapon Hadrian had given to the Empire. A transmission comes in from the Mistwalker, for Lorien has somehow survived this battle with Mudinar and made it through the Chantry Armada. Orphan fires the Demiurge's Darklight in response, and scores a hit that destroys the Ararat. All the while, they wait for news the star has been destroyed. Transmissions come in from Basander Lin, whose fleet received a warning from Hadrian's and has begun to withdraw. Then, an eerie light settles over the bridge of the Demiurge, stopping everyone in their tracks. In that moment, I heard, we all did, a terrible cry go out through all creation. Hadrian uses his powers to stare through time and space, and sees a man and woman illumined in the unholy light. He senses them perceiving him. Beautiful they were once, and mighty, each a part of creation itself. Their anguish was plain, their words meaningless. They had made their choice long ago, before time began, before the first stars were kindled, when the cosmos was hot and close. Mudinar and Ushara are destroyed, and Hadrian falls to his knees, numb with pain and grief at what he has done. His purpose at long last has been fulfilled, and already he senses Edward's scathing judgment. "Am I a good man?" I asked. No one answered, not even my God, and so I wept. The sun is destroyed, Gododin laid to waste in a great victory for humanity. The Cielsen are shattered, their people losing all sense of unity. But the fact remains that Forum is gone, and the Lothrians continue to wage war on the edges of Imperial space. Earth, by circumstance, has inadvertently become the center of humanity's universe once more. By proxy, the Order and Chantry are now the bastions of power of human society, and Hadrian's main opposition for the Solar Throne. Hadrian drops off the Danuans at a safe harbor for them to settle, and suddenly realizes every single one of them has green eyes, perhaps a sign from the Absolute that rescuing them was always the right path. Preparations are made for the Demiurge to fly to Temba. There, with the backing of the Jadian Navy, Round Table Fleet, and Basander Lin, Hadrian will invoke his claim to the throne. He and Selena will be formally wed, and then go on a royal procession to affirm the royal house's loyalties to them. Hadrian worries about the future of his rule as Basander Lin arrives at the rendezvous point. He views Hadrian as a god, and proclaims he has enough men to take the Tenba garrison. Hadrian has no response for him, cannot summon any words. We had reached the end of the prophecies, the end of my visions and dreams. It may be a new beginning for humanity, but for Hadrian Marlowe, who has been alive for more than 1,000 years, it feels very much like an uncertain ending. Then inexplicably, the Mistwalker and Lorien Aristides arrive, having survived against all the odds. Lorien and his captains meet with Hadrian and his on board the Demiurge, where Lorien reveals his ship was able to somehow ride the supernova from the astrophage until they could get to warp. The two friends catch up, and Lorien advises Hadrian that his plan to take Earth from the Chantry is folly. The technological capabilities of the Order are entirely unknown to Hadrian and Lorien, making the risk of losing the Demiurge significantly high. Additionally, because of the Chantry's control over the datasphere, all Imperial-made ships must be assumed to be compromised. Lorien makes the bold argument that it would be safer to destroy the Earth, to end the war before it has a chance to begin. It would undoubtedly start a bloody crusade against every Chantry sanctum in the Imperium, and after some consideration, Hadrian decides to instead continue to Tenba. Lorien states he will not help Hadrian there, scoffing when Hadrian says he believes eventually the truth will bring down the Chantry. It is an ironic twist of fate, for the Chantry has likely been scheming for years to exploit the prophesized arrival of the Chosen. Instead, Hadrian, chosen by the Absolute, has upended their plans. Nicephorus then proposes the Palatine genetic keys be used to exert power over the Chantry. Hadrian's power to seal and approve every royal birth floors Lorien and Caim, who are disgusted at the intentional mutations of unimproved children. It is then revealed Nicephorus is a failsafe for the keys in case William dies, as Hadrian has not been formally granted access to the databanks yet. Additionally, Nicephorus reveals that all the Pallas Androgyns were backups, but were terminated when William left for the Aurora. The Chantry thus believes Hadrian is the key to the databank, when it is actually Nicephorus. Hadrian then comes to believe the Demiurge must be destroyed. He deems it too dangerous to exist despite its unrivaled military power. It is a betrayal of Orphan as well, who lashes out and attacks Hadrian. Lorien shoots the mutant and kills it, committing them to destroying the Demiurge. Hadrian resolves to go to Tenba and fully expose the Chantry and rally the great houses. Lorien will not accompany them, instead opting to travel to the outer edges of the galaxy. Then, a mysterious message comes in, reportedly from what a Lateran captain calls the background noise of creation. Hadrian is given a small piece of paper, which he reads as a message for him. He does not tell the others what it says, but feels more at peace with the course ahead of him. In the end, Orphan and Ramanthanu's bodies are cast into the supernova engulfing Gododin and destroyed. Hadrian prepares to take Selena with him to Tenba, and pulls Edward aside for a final word. He tells Edward to keep Cassandra safe, and that both must escape with Autumno and the Urchtani. Hadrian will give Edward one of the Darklight cannons, and warns him there may still be more Watchers who take an interest in humanity. Hadrian decrees the fight against the Chantry will not be his, It will instead be birthed from the movement created by Edward and Cassandra. It may be a long while coming, but it is with quiet certainty he knows the order will eventually fall. Edward is directed to search for allies within the great houses, and even his own church, to rally humanity against the Chantry. The Demiurge is evacuated, and Hadrian sends Cassandra away with Edward. He tells her she is to be his Octor, the new player in the game Hadrian is now looking to abandon entirely. Cassandra is advised to seek out Hadrian's sister Sabine on Caria, and she flies away with Edward. Countless smaller ships fly away from the Demiurge, which is destroyed using the Darklight cannon, and Hadrian then sails for Tenba, knowing he is going to his doom and death. However, upon their arrival, the Demiurge immediately encounters a massive armada composed of the sons of Earth. Among them somehow is the Aurora, for it has somehow survived Gododin. They immediately receive a transmission, decreeing Alexander VI is now Emperor, succeeding William the Great. Hadrian's plan has gone terribly wrong, and he sends a warning to the Jadians, urging them to flee. To protect Bassander, he commands the Strategos to turn both him and Selena in, and to recognize Alexander's authority. Hadrian knows now the game is up, and he and Selena prepare to surrender to the Martians. Bassander reluctantly calls them in, and before long several sentinels board their shuttle, led by their captain Cario. They immediately seize Selena, and the excubitor Varus defends her. Varus kills the sentinel, but Cariot draws a pistol and shoots a high matter bullet clean through Varus's head, killing the excubitor. Hadrian's party is thus subdued into silence as they are led outside, surrounded by Martians on both sides. They were waiting for us, on the steps of the palace. He was waiting for us, seated on the gestatory throne, that confection of red velvet and gold, his head haloed with rays like the sun. Gone was the open helm he'd worn throughout our time on Gododin, gone that soldierly affection. In its place, he wore a crown of living gold, a diadem woven of the gold branches of the tree of Avalon, the grass crown. He had arrayed himself as a conqueror, as a hero. This was his triumph, his final victory. His eyes were cold. Emperor Alexander VI addresses Hadrian using the royal we, accusing him of murdering William. He calls Selena a whore, twisting the use of the astrophage into mourning for the lives lost in the supernova. Nicephorus steps up and tells Alexander the Demiurge is destroyed, and declares Hadrian the true emperor and William's chosen successor. The crowd roars out in indignity, the lies of the Chantry so firmly set that many see Hadrian as an usurper. But Nicephorus refuses to back down, scolding Alexander and climbing the stairs towards the throne. He tries to push through the sentinels to no avail, and then a single shot rings out. The last palace androgen of the imperial house, and holder of the keys to the Palatine genomes, falls dead. Alexander's face was white as death. Night had fallen, true night, all across the galaxy. The keys to the Palatine bloodlines are lost, thus dooming all the royal houses of humanity to a slow death. The Palatine caste will waste away slowly, thus evening the playing field for countless billions. Alexander is furious at the murder of Nicephorus, and bludgeons and hacks the sentinel responsible to death. "You see," he said, as if he had not made himself a spectacle. "You see your emperor's justice, swift and certain, and fair." Hadrian approaches the body of Nicephorus and proclaims his shadow will haunt Alexander for the rest of his life and that he, ominously, is to be the last. Alexander points his high matter sword at Hadrian, who simply grabs it and smiles. No blade can cut the devil down. Alexander stumbles back out of fright, the grass crown falling off his head. He spurns Selena's aid and orders for the sentinels to shoot Hadrian. None comply as Hadrian continues on. "You will be the last emperor," I said. "The galaxy will wither in your hand." Then, a figure of the Chantry steps forwards. Hadrian with a chill sees a familiar rune mark tattooed on his forehead. It is Yod, somehow reborn and truly the secret master of the Solan Empire. A raging Alexander demands Hadrian be hanged, and Selena is detained by two executors. Hadrian commands them to stop, and they obey. It sends a stir through the crowd, for the knights can only obey the imperial house and emperor. Hadrian offers the emperor's rings in exchange for the freedom of his people, but Alexander petulantly refuses. Left with no other option, Hadrian casts down the gold rings, and Selena is grabbed by Martians. A would-be assassin attacks Hadrian, but Nima leaps up and tackles him to the ground. Hadrian kills the assassin, but Nima dies in front of him from a neck wound. The executors, triggered by the attempt on Hadrian's life, attack the Martians and Sentinels as chaos erupts on the stairs. Hadrian spies Alexander, but does not move to kill him, deeming the man a simple pawn. He commands the executors to kneel, indicative of the true power he still holds. Hadrian is subdued and captured by the Martians, and Selena is taken away. He will never see her again. Sometime later, Hadrian is visited in his cell by Pisander Lin, who has been removed from rank. Pisander tries to convince Hadrian to escape with him to no avail. Hadrian must die, for if he escapes, his friends will all be killed and hunted down. Pisander is downcast, but Hadrian then asks him to bury his sword by the graves of Red Company on Colchis. Hadrian lets Pisander leave, ready and willing to die. He has carried word of my deeds to countless stars, kindled not the firestorm, but a fire in my name. I have seen his followers, my followers, on many worlds since my return. Ripe fruit for my daughter, for the war and harvest that is to come. The next day, a crowd of thousands lines up to watch Hadrian's execution. In his heart of hearts, he does not hate them, knowing due to greater forces the masses barely have command of their own wills. Hadrian is led before Alexander and Yod, and the false emperor gloats before Hadrian. Alexander then stabs Hadrian in the side with a knife, claiming at last he has finally beaten him. Hadrian is led to the scaffold, where Alexander announces his crimes of high treason and regicide, sentencing him to death. Peace overcomes Hadrian as the noose is put around his neck. The earth fell away beneath my feet, and wings immortal took my weight. They had wanted me to suffer, had wanted me to choke and purple and gasp. But the Absolute, in his mercy, his kindness, his tender care, broke my neck at once.